Hello, you dirty potters. How are you today? In today's video, we're going to be talking about crazing in pottery. What is it? What causes it? How to avoid it? And some of the misinformation surrounding crazing. And trust me, there is a lot of misinformation around crazing and how it even works. This video is going to be very akin to my stop wiping off your bisque video, where I take things to the extreme. So not only am I going to tell you all of the misinformation around it, if you believed some of this misinformation, I'm going to show you video proof of whatever somebody told you the way it works is the way it works, ain't the way it works. Now this is going to be one of my longer videos, but at the end of this video, you are going to receive a mass amount of knowledge. At the end of this video, you will know what crazing is, why it's bad, you'll know exactly what causes it, and you'll know the responses to tell people after they tell you misinformation about it. And you most likely have a blog that I'll put down at my website, earthnationceramics.com, where I will put all of the video proof to the naysayers that you'll meet in the wild. Because this video is a little bit longer, we're going to be breaking it down into three main sections. What is crazing, for those of you who don't know what it is or how it happens? We're going to talk about what causes crazing, and then we're going to go over a slew of misinformation and proof that I'm going to give you that the misinformation that you've received most likely isn't accurate. This part of the video is probably going to be the longest, so if you already have preconceived notions of what causes crazing, but you want like video proof of what doesn't cause crazing, then you can kind of skip to this part here. But if you're new and you don't know what crazing is, or you want to know how to avoid it in your work, stick around, you very attractive artist that I am sure has already clicked the like button. And if you are familiar with my content, you know exactly what's coming near the end of this video. And you should be afraid. Firstly, what is crazing? Crazing are these little or big cracks that usually show up in your glaze matrix after you're done firing your work. It often presents like this, and many people who use clear gloss glazes have a problem with their work crazing. But a lot of people seem to know that it's technically not food safe. And this is mainly because bacteria can get inside of those cracks. They're not technically just aesthetic on the glaze. They are real cracks inside of your glaze matrix. And because of that, any food or anything that you put inside of your bowl that you eat off of that has crazing technically gets inside of those little cracks. And if you don't wash them out very well, or you let them sit too long, bacteria gets in those cracks and cohabitates germs, bacteria, and sometimes even mold. That's generally the reason we in the pottery community claim that crazing is not food safe. That being said, I have known no cases where someone has actively gotten sick or anything from crazing, because most of us have good enough cleaning standards to not just leave food inside of our stuff for that long. It's not super dangerous to the human body, but I am still very anti-crazing. If it's on my work, I don't consider something food safe. And if I do use a glaze that does craze, I use it on the outside of something like a mug or a cup, where the majority of the food product is not touching the crazing itself. The real issue for me personally is that it technically makes your work, whether it's functional or not, weaker. See these little cracks here? They technically go all the way down to your clay body and barely touch it. And you might be thinking to yourself, this is not so much of a big idea, but let's take something like some simple cloth into consideration. This here, this is a towel. It's kind of hard to rip, right? Well, let's imagine we had a tiny, tiny little cut right there. We didn't cut all the way through, we just made the tiniest of cuts right there. This is just a weak point, a chink in the armor, so to speak. And can you imagine, just like crazing, once we have a tiny little crack, it becomes a lot easier to rip. This is the reason why crazing is dangerous, especially for functional work. It does technically make your work weaker. Many of you are more concerned with the food safety aspect of it, but realistically, the real issue is that your work far more susceptible to damage and weaker as a result of crazing in general. Otherwise, if you have crazing in your pottery on a food safety standard, you should just wash your work better if you are going to eat off of the craze work, which I still don't want you to, but the devil you do know. Crazing is technically a pottery defect for those two main factors. It's not a horrible one, and it's really easy to fix, but it is considered a pottery flaw for those factors. Okay, Dante, I now hate crazing, so what causes crazing? Why is my work crazing? It's actually really easy. The thing that causes crazing is the difference in between thermal expansion in between the clay and the glaze. And that might sound super fancy, but think of it this way. Everything has a thermal expansion number. When you heat things up, they kind of expand a little bit, and when you cool them down, they contract. Well, your glaze and your clay technically both have their own thermal expansion. They expand and contract to a certain level. A lot of glass artists will know this as the coefficient of expansion. And this might sound super fancy to some people who don't know about thermal expansion and the fact that it happens everywhere around you all the time. It does have to be taken into account. But if you look at your clay specs, you go to the producer of your clay, or even go on the website and look up your clay, if you scroll all the way down, it'll probably have what you know as COE, coefficient of expansion. Glassmakers are very aware of this number and how it fits into their work. Unfortunately, for you and I, we are ceramic artists, so we're trying to fuse two different things together that both have their own numbers of coefficient expansion. Your glaze has a value of X, and your clay has a value of X, and you are trying to form them into one solid object. The problem is, if these two values are too far apart on a scale, well, it causes stress on the glaze trying to form onto the clay body. And this stress, in turn, is what is creating the cracks in your glaze matrix. That's right. Crazing is all due to thermal expansion differences. Whenever I go to high schools and I try to explain this to a group of people who ask the crazing question, I always say, well, imagine glaze is like this and clay is like this, and they both expand and contract because of thermal expansion. Well, if glaze goes like this, right, and clay goes like this, all this space in between where they didn't form perfectly at the same size ends up causing stress on one or both of these things. So this is going to try its best to fit onto the pot and shrink and shrink and shrink as it cools down. Unfortunately, it doesn't really work that way all the time. This stress that is caused not only creates a really cool sound effect, but it also causes this crazing. The thing that causes crazing, and look me in the eyes when I say this, is the difference in between the rate of thermal expansion in between the clay and the glaze. Okay, Dante, well, how do I know what the coefficient of expansion is for my glaze? I mean, you showed me how to look it up for my clay, but how do I know for my glaze? Unfortunately, glaze companies are not gonna hand over their thermal expansion number to you if you are a bottle glaze maker. But if you have the recipe to any glazes, you can technically put it in a calculator like Glazy or Ceramics Material Workshop, and they do. Granted, it is not an accurate number, but they will give you the coefficient of expansion number or the thermal expansion number. And I want to be clear here, it's really difficult to figure out how much silica expands and contracts and all that junk when it's in the kiln because it goes from one state to another, and it's really difficult to measure. So to be honest with you, the thermal expansion number for glazes isn't really that great or accurate whatsoever. I still use it myself because I've kind of figured out how much what number can do with what, even though they are technically non-accurate numbers, but it's kind of like numbers on a clock. Those are made up numbers. Those numbers are not real. Humanity just put those up there and we all kind of agree that's what they mean. But the universe does not care that it's 12 o'clock. We are just giving numbers to motion, but even though they're made up numbers, you still use them. Well, I'm getting crazing in my work, Dante, and I clicked this video specifically so that you can tell me how to get rid of it. So how do I get rid of it? Well, it's actually really easy. The way you do it is to change your thermal expansion number. And it sounds fancy, but realistically, every clay has a different thermal expansion number, and so does every glaze. Unfortunately, you're gonna have to change one of those two things. You've probably noticed that your clay crazes with a specific glaze that you're using, right? Right, and sometimes you change glazes and it doesn't craze, right? Right, well, if you want to keep using those glazes, you're gonna have to change your clay. But I don't like changing my clay. I finally found one that I like. Listen to your pottery dad for a second. There are so many different types of clay out there that exist. There are other fish in the sea. You can find one that you like that isn't the one you prefer already. I get it, you want a white clay that feels good. You want a brown grog clay that doesn't feel like it has grog in it. You can definitely find one. There are so many clays out there that have different thermal expansions that'll work with the glazes that you have right now. Don't die on the hill of this one clay body when realistically another one will work way better for you. And realistically, unless you're like me and you're kind of like a glaze designer or glaze chemist to some degree, you probably don't know how to handle coefficient of expansion of glaze. So it's either change your clay body or develop a glaze. A little trade secret here, the majority of glaze companies often use a base and then they add colorants to that base. So technically speaking, the entire line of glazes is the same exact glaze with different colorants in it. That means that if you have a glaze, let's say it's like C-4 or C-3 or whatever, the Celadon line from Amico, and it crazes on your work, there's a high chance that the rest of them are gonna craze on your work as well. if you are using the same clay body within that line. So it's not like you have to test every single glaze. If you're getting crazing with Archie's base and then all the other glazes within that line of Archie's base, you're probably going to continue to get glazing because the thermal expansion number didn't really change. Using the same clay, and the glaze is basically the same with different colors in it. That's basically how you get rid of crazing. You have to change the thermal expansion of either your clay or your glaze. And the cool thing for you, based on how you look at it, is that if you find out the coefficient of expansion for your clay, let's say you're using B mixed with grog and boom, there's the number. Let's say you don't have any crazing problems with that clay body and you just changed to it because you had crazing problems on your other clay. If you look at that number, that coefficient of expansion, it's a pretty good bet that if you change to another clay body that is close to this number, you will probably have way better luck with not crazing on the new clay body you chose because you know that this number is the number that you're not getting any crazing on, which is awesome because that gave you a huge leg up on your testing. You now know what crazing is, what causes it, and how to fix it. The last part of the video is mainly the reason I made this video, because I have been through so many studios in America that at this point, I hear these rumors everywhere. And I'm here to go to the extreme for you to prove that a lot of the things that you're hearing are not only not true, but if you kind of walk down the path of just thinking about it a little bit, you'll probably realize it's not true. There is a slew of misinformation of why crazing happens. The one that I hear the most is you didn't let the kiln cool down to 100 degrees before you opened it, and that's what causes crazing. Oh, if you want to fix crazing, just take a spoonful of silica and put it inside of your glaze jar, or take a bunch of silica and put it inside the bucket of glaze. That'll fix the crazing. The last one, and the one that you are absolutely not going to believe after the end of this video, is, well, you put all your work near the top level of the kiln here, and when you opened the kiln, the cold air came rushing in and hit the top level of the stuff here, so it thermo-shocked all the work, and that's what caused crazing. Only you got lucky because only a couple of them actually crazed. Usually all of them craze on the top level, but the cold air that hit them, that's making the crazing. Not only do all of these drive me up a wall, we are also going to disprove them by the end of this video with some very ham-fisted experiments. I think this part of the video has to hit about 3 or 4 different sectors of people. For those of you who just want sourceable good information and you just want like straight out answers and you use things like Google, or even some of you who use things like AI, the AI will tell you that crazing is caused by the thermal expansion difference in between the clay and the glaze. Google will tell you crazing is caused by the thermal expansion difference in between the clay and the glaze. The Ceramics Material Workshop, John Britt, myself, and my blogs at earthnationceramics.com, a slew of reputable sources in the ceramic art world will tell you crazing is caused by the difference in between the thermal expansion of the clay and the glaze. For some of you that need more anecdotal evidence, you most likely have heard somebody say that opening your kiln before 100 degrees is the thing that causes crazing. And you trusted that information because why not? The person who told you that is either your teacher or they've been doing it for a long time. And their work looks great, so they must know something about something, right? They've been doing it for 30 years and their work looks great. So instead of you thinking they've been doing it wrong for 30 years, you think to yourself, well, they have to know something about something. Well, I have horrible news for you, unfortunately. You see, this is probably the most difficult part of the video for me because technically speaking, crazing can be exacerbated, you can hear it, but just because it got exacerbated and you can see it with your eyes, or you can hear it in your kiln via that little ping noise, that doesn't mean it went away or is present, unfortunately. You guys want to hear some real quick? Here, check out this video. I have a glaze that crazes on my porcelain 24/7. I'm starting to get rid of it by using a lot of it, but it crazes no matter what I do because I need to reformulate it and I'm unwilling to change my clay because I can do that. This in the pottery world is called pinging or singing. And if you do have crazing and you do open up your kiln, no matter what temperature you open it up at, you are technically going to hear this sound sooner or later. And honestly, let's give it a good 10 seconds. It is a beautiful sound. That technically is the sound of the glaze crazing as it is stressed out, trying to combine itself with the pottery. Technically speaking, if the one thing you can take away from this video is that pinging or singing is the sound of crazing when it happens, that's kind of true. There is a large correlation for that. And here's the funnest part of the video. You might be one of those people who believe the person that told you to just leave it alone until it reaches 100 degrees and it'll get rid of the crazing. And you might have taken out that glaze and saw no crazing with your human eyeballs and thought to yourself, cool, it fixes the problem, that person was right. Unfortunately, I have horrible news for you in that you most likely still have crazing, but you just can't see it. Come on, let's go over to my workbench and I'll show you exactly what I mean. Do you see this cup right here with a clear gloss glaze over it? It looks like it has no crazing, right? From afar, especially, you can't really see any crazing on this, and it looks fine. Of course, when I took this out at 200 degrees, the cracks got bigger because the clay was more stressed. Last time I pulled this out of the kiln and it wasn't 100 degrees, I ended up seeing larger cracks and crazing. Well, a couple of things. Number one, thickness of application does matter with your work. If you have a thick application of a glaze that is going to craze because of that thermal expansion difference, you are going to see larger crazing. And even if you leave it till 100 degrees before opening the kiln, that crazing still exists, whether you can see it or not. Let's take my black Sharpie here. All right, now let's wipe this away. Look at that. You can now see the crazing clear as day. You just couldn't see it with your human eyes. If you didn't see this right here, you would think this is a beautifully green, clear gloss glazed liner glaze on the inside cup. But it does have crazing, and the only reason I knew that is because I took a little bit of marker, went on the inside, left it in there for maybe, 30 seconds. Once I tried to wipe it out, the crazing became very, very obvious. I want you to take this lesson to heart. Just because you cannot see crazing with your human eyes does not mean it's not there. And if the thermal expansion in between your clay and your glaze don't get along, and if you saw crazing happen on your work before, left the kiln until it reached 100 degrees, and then you saw less crazing, that does not mean the crazing went away. That just means you are not able to see the crazing. It does not mean that it's completely gone. And we're actually really lucky that we have a clear gloss liner glaze to test this on with a clay body that it doesn't agree with, because it is a horrible thing for it to happen on a colored glaze. This is my floating blue glaze that I reglazed and left overnight, considering it takes forever to dry when you reglaze things. Well, I came back in the morning, didn't like the glaze job, wiped off a little bit of the glaze, and guess what I found? That's right, crazing exists even on colored glazes. It's just really easy to see on clear glazes or see-through translucent type glazes. Even with the floating blue glaze that I got from a John Britt book, the crazing still exists on my porcelain clay body. I just never had the mind to do some type of contrasting color on it to see if the crazing exists. Get rid of this. Yep, that's gone. I'm telling you, when I figured out that I had crazing on my floating blue glaze, one of the world's most beloved glazes, it almost broke my heart because, well, most of you don't bother to check colored glazes, seeing as if you don't see it, it doesn't exist, right? Unfortunately, crazing still exists even on the most colorful of phase separation, favorite of all time glazes, and it should be checked with some type of contrasting color. So when your friend told you, just leave the kiln alone until it reaches a natural cooled 100 degrees state, and then you can open it, that'll get rid of your crazing, there's a very high chance that you most likely still have crazing. You probably just never did the contrast trick I showed you right now to make sure the crazing was gone. And there's a really high chance that it's still there, I'm sorry to tell you that. Good old-fashioned correlation versus causation, except for human eyeballs are actually really bad at seeing stuff. God, why is that light so bright? It's okay though, don't worry about it. I've already developed a better floating blue glaze that has like little gold crystal flakes in it, and this is kicking the crap out of floating blue. Of course, as the video goes on, we're gonna get more ham-fisted with our evidence, because as we start to disprove things, we have to bring evidence to you to show you that the thing that you might have heard on the misinformation scale not only doesn't exist, but we can break those rules all the time. You might have heard your friend say something like, well, you can't thermoshock the clay. If you thermoshock it, that's what causes crazing. By opening the kiln early, you cause thermoshock. You're letting cold air rush into the kiln and you are causing crazing, and that's what's going on. The thermoshock, Morty. I think we've already taken care of people who need reliable ceramic sources, because they will believe sources and use those sources as a backbone of what they do, right? And I also think we've taken care of the people who need anecdotes, because I'm betting a lot of you were told leave the kiln alone, don't open it until it reaches 100 degrees. And you guys should stay, because we have more stuff for you, of course. So you're beautiful. But I think we've taken care of them because they're most likely gonna go over to some of their work, do a contrasting color like I did with the floating blue or I did with the clear gloss glaze, and realize, oh man, my crazing problem never went away. I just couldn't see it because the cracks weren't as exacerbated because I didn't open the kiln a little bit early. And technically speaking, if crazing happens and you open the kiln early, it will exacerbate crazing, but it does not cause crazing. If the crazing was gonna happen, it was gonna happen anyway. The third group of people need to see me do what they think is impossible. Instead of telling you that you can definitely open your kiln before something like 100 degrees and it won't thermoshock your work, I wanna say first of all, that's not the way thermoshocking works in the ceramic art world. Anyone who's telling you thermoshock this and thermoshock that most likely doesn't know how thermoshocking works, because we work with ceramic materials and they're quite strong. But instead of me just telling you that, I'm going to show you a slew of clips of myself and a buddy of mine opening their kilns way past 100 degrees. I'm gonna put all these clips here at once, and I'm just gonna let you watch them for a little bit while the music plays. But if you wanna skip this, the most important video I have to show you, if you do wanna skip this, is the one that I took to the extreme. The one piece of footage I have that says if opening the kiln early causes crazing, hold my beer and meet God. This is a video of me venting my kiln at 1300 degrees Fahrenheit, putting a fan on it, cooling it down faster, waiting until it reaches maybe 600 or 500 degrees, taking it out, shooting it with cold water from a spray bottle, and then dunking it in cold Sacramento tap water to cool it down even faster. This work went from about 600 degrees to 70 degrees in the course of 5 minutes. After you watch this footage, which I sped up for you, but I did not cut any of the footage, you will most likely see pictures of all of these things in clear daylight, so that you can see that even with light shining through the glaze matrix that I made a little bit more clear than usual just for the purposes of this video, there is no crazing whatsoever. Now I did speed it up, and it is like a 3-minute video because I sped it up so much, but if opening the kiln early caused crazing, every single one of these would be crazed, cracked, or broken. That's not how crazing works. Opening or venting your kiln early is not the thing that causes crazing. If the thermal expansion rate of your clay and your glaze agree with each other anyway, you won't get crazing regardless. If they don't agree, you will get crazing no matter what. And I've just shown you, not only me opening up my kiln a bunch of different times way past 100 degrees, I've shown you the extreme, 1300 degrees. The elements are still red. My favorite thing to do with people who claim that thermoshock happens like in between maybe like 300 and 100 degrees and things like that is to ask them super basic questions of examples that already happen in the world that would cause thermoshock, but didn't cause thermoshock and didn't break or craze the work whatsoever. And just watch their brains fry as you ask the most basic questions. Hold on, if opening the kiln early and taking the work out like past 100 degrees or even like 200 degrees causes crazing and thermoshock, then how do people do raku? Don't we take that out at like 1,000 degrees or something so that not only we can do horsehair, but we can also put extra stuff on it like feathers and what? Like that's still pottery in a kiln and we're taking it out way after 100 degrees. Why doesn't that cause thermoshock, Mr. Teacher? Yeah, teach, if thermoshock worked that way in pottery, then why can't I take bakeware that I have in my house made of ceramic and glass for that fact, put it in my oven and bake in it, and then take it out when it's done? I bake stuff at like 400 degrees and I'm just pulling it out whenever the cobbler's done. Also, if going from over 100 degrees causes crazing, then like, what about me microwaving things like my coffee? What about stuff like me pouring hot coffee or hot tea into a cup and then drinking it? The outside is super cold, but the inside is piping hot, just like I like my coffee. Why doesn't that cause crazing? Yeah, teacher, what about pit fires? Pit fires are just like somebody lighting bisque work on fire immediately, which is arguably weaker because it's essentially low fire work, right? Like, wouldn't that cause it to explode or something? Hey teacher, if we're not supposed to vent our kilns like whatsoever before 100 degrees, then what is this all about? What is this for? I mean, most of the kiln manufacturers put this here specifically so that we can vent our kilns like this, right? Like why would the kiln manufacturers even make this if we weren't meant to vent our kilns? Yeah, teacher, if opening the kiln early is the thing that causes crazing because of thermoshock, does that mean that if I open this kiln at like 300 degrees, everything in the kiln will be crazed? Or will it only be like a couple of pieces of students that use clay that's different from mine because mine didn't craze? And just watch the teacher's brain melt as you ask the most basic questions. Well, Timmy, that's because...
Bro, you're trash, bro. Is them tears, bro? Come on, bro. You gotta get you together, boy.
On top of the video footage that I sent you, and on top of the video footage that I will send to my website, earthnationceramics.com, as a blog in case you want to re-watch that video without the rest of this YouTube video, because I always put stuff on my website for my blogs whenever I make videos like this. Crazing is caused by the thermal expansion difference in between your clay and your glaze. There are many, many, many different ways in which I can disprove that, including just ham-fistedly showing you a video of me opening it up at ungodly temperatures and dunking it straight in water after spraying it with even colder water. God, I love making these videos because I get to take things to the extreme for a reason. Usually if I take things to this extreme and open up kilns this early, I get yelled at by like somebody, but I get to do it underneath the purview of science and like proving people incorrect that I've been giving you misinformation, which I can't have. I love you too much. So I get a reason to do these videos, which God, I love. Well, thank you, Dirty Potters, for joining me today. You know, I do know that this video probably sounded to some of you like your pottery dad yelling at you. And you know what? You can comment pottery daddy down below to accept the fact that I'm your new pottery dad. I got more kids to adopt, it's fine. But I have been to so many studios where the kiln loader themselves will say the most atrociously incorrect things, and the students will believe that person because they've been doing it for quite some time, only to have the same problems and message me on Instagram a year or two later and go, hey, the kiln loader and my teacher told me to do this thing to fix my problem, but I don't think it's fixing my problem. I'm still getting crazing sometimes, even when I leave the kiln underneath 100 degrees, even when I'm putting on less coats, even when I'm doing this and this and that. And the only time it changes is sometimes when I use a different clay body and I don't understand what's going on. Now you understand what's going on. Now you understand why crazing happens and how to get rid of it. Thank you, Dirty Potters, for joining me today. Good luck on your next art projects. I am going to post those videos because I assume you didn't watch them all the way. You probably fast forwarded or went to the final video that I posted as it was the most, like I have like 4 different videos of me doing that exact same thing. And I'm going to post a lot of those videos on my website and my blog at earthnationceramics.com if you want to watch them again without having to watch this YouTube video. Make sure you send this video to somebody who's been feeding you misinformation so they can see that video and just watch their face melt. And I will see you, Dirty Potters, next week.
Thank you for your patronage.
But I read this one book and I talked to Scott and they said not to open the kiln before 200 degrees, don't vent it before 200 degrees, and that's because my work is gonna... No, you're miscorrelating something. They didn't tell you because your work's gonna mess up. They know why crazing happens. The reason they tell you not to open the kiln before a certain amount of degrees is because it's a box of fire and you're a human being, it's gonna burn you. What company wants the liability of saying it's totally fine to open your kiln at 400, 500 degrees? You should never do the thing that I've done in this video. I only did it multiple times on video to prove my point. You should just wait until it reaches like 300, vent it a little bit, and then step away from it until it reaches 100 degrees. And then you can safely take it out with gloves. Just because it's not safe doesn't mean it's not possible. But the companies want you to be safe. They don't care if your work cracks, man.